Chapter 50, Ecosystems. So what is an ecosystem? It consists of all the organisms living in a community, as well as the abiotic factors with which they interact, the weather, the water, soil. Each ecosystems range from a microcosm, such as an aquarium, to a large area, such as a lake or forest. So the ecology of ecosystems emphasizes energy flow through the ecosystem and chemical cycling. So ecosystems are transformers of energy and processes of matter. So ecologists group organisms in a community into trophic levels of feeding relationships, so you can follow how energy is transformed. So energy is conserved but degraded to heat during ecosystem processes. To the next. Energy and nutrients pass from primary producers, autotrophs, plants, to primary consumers, herbivores, organisms that eat the plants, and then to secondary consumers, carnivores, that eat the herbivores. Energy enters from the sun, flows through the system, exits the ecosystem. So this is showing how nutrients cycle within an ecosystem. So energy enters, flows through, and exits an ecosystem, whereas chemical nutrients cycle primarily within it. In this generalized scheme, energy, the dark orange arrows, enters from the sun as radiation, moves as chemical energy transfers through the food web, and exits as heat radiated into space. Okay, you can see that at each level. Most transfers of nutrients, the blue arrows, through the trophic levels lead eventually to detritus, which is dead organisms, dead plant and animal matter. The nutrients then cycle back to primary. Decomposition connects all trophic levels. Detrivores are mainly bacteria and fungi, and they recycle essential chemical elements by decomposing organic matter and returning elements to inorganic reservoirs. So here, the fungi decomposing on a dead tree. Physical and chemical factors limit primary production in ecosystems. So the primary production is the amount of light converted to chemical energy by plants, by autotrophs during a given time period. The extent of photosynthetic production sets the spending limit for the system's energy budget. So the global energy budget is the amount of solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface limits photosynthetic output of ecosystems. Only a small fraction of solar energy actually synthetic organisms. Gross and net primary production. So the total primary production is known as the ecosystem's gross primary production, GPP. Net primary production, NPP, is gross primary production minus energy used by the primary producers, the plants, for respiration. So only net primary production is available to consumers. And this is an interesting graph. It compares and contrasts three ecosystems, well, many ecosystems in three different graphs, showing how they vary greatly in net primary production and contribution to total net primary production on Earth. So this is percentage of Earth's surface area, primarily covered by oceans, 65%. Okay, average net production here, you can see algal beds and reefs provide a lot, and tropical rainforests provide a lot on down. Percentage of Earth's net primary production. Oceans, followed by regional annual net primary production for Earth. So overall, terrestrial ecosystems contribute about 2/3 of global net primary production. Marine ecosystems contribute about 1/3. So the light violet, the lowest primary production, to the red, the highest primary production. So, so the red is chlorophyll activity, and this was collected by satellites. Note that the tropical areas of land have the highest rate of production, yellow and red on the map. In marine and freshwater ecosystems, both light and nutrients control primary production. However, the depth of light affects primary production in the photic zone of an ocean or lake, light limitation. The photic zone is how deep photosynthetic organisms can survive. Nutrient limitation in ocean and lakes. More than light, nutrients limit primary production in geographic regions of the ocean and in lakes. A limiting nutrient is an element that must be added for production to increase in an area. The nutrient most often limiting marine production is either nitrogen or phosphorus. More abundant in deeper water is no photosynthesis to compete. So this graph, this map and these two graphs, it says it's an experiment. Which nutrient limits phytoplankton production along the coast of Long Island? So they noted that the addition of ammonium, which contains nitrogen, causes heavy phytoplankton growth in the cultures, but the addition of phosphate did not. So since adding phosphorus, which was already in rich supply, had no effect on growth, whereas adding nitrogen increased phytoplankton density dramatically, the researchers concluded that nitrogen is the nutrient that limits phytoplankton growth in this ecosystem. So you can see purple, ammonium-rich, the yellow, phosphate-enriched, red, unenriched control. So it's very obvious that nitrogen was experimental eutrophication of a lake when cyanobacteria dominates and fixes nitrogen. Very impressive picture here. So the addition of large amounts of nutrients to lakes has a wide range of ecological impacts. Some areas, their sewage runoff has caused eutrophication of lakes, which has led to loss of most fish species. So it's too many nutrients. The far basin was fertilized with inorganic sources of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So this is what runoff of excess fertilizers does. The near basin was treated with only carbon and nitrogen and remained unchanged. Therefore, phosphorus was the limiting nutrient. Within 2 months, cyanobacterial bloom occurred. Primary production in terrestrial and wetland ecosystems. So in these ecosystems, climatic factors such as temperature and moisture affect primary production on a large scale. You've got actual evapotranspiration is the water actually transpired by plants through the stomata in the lower part of the leaves during the day and then evaporated from a landscape. It is related to net primary production. So actual evapotranspiration can represent the contrast of wet and dry climates. So here with the six ecosystems here, actual evapotranspiration, temperature, and moisture related to terrestrial net primary production in selected ecosystems. So desert shrubland, Arctic tundra, temperate grassland, mountain coniferous forest, then temperate forest, and up here, tropical forest. So you can see net primary production here, way up, actual evapotranspiration. So they go hand in hand, 1,500 millimeters per year, with temperate forest being behind. On a more local scale, a soil nutrient is often the limiting factor in primary production. So adding nitrogen boosts primary production, net primary production. And that can be seen here with phosphorus only, control, nitrogen only, nitrogen plus phosphorus, growth took off, increased biomass. And these are the two primary components of fertilizer. Energy transfer between trophic levels is usually less than 20% efficient. Secondary production of an ecosystem is the amount of chemical energy in food converted to new biomass during a given period of time. So, we're talking about herbivores. Eat only a small fraction of plant material produced, and they cannot digest all the plant material that they eat. And in this diagram, energy partitioning within a link of the food chain. So this is producer, primary consumer here. So less than 17% of the caterpillar's food is actually used for secondary production growth. So plant material eaten by a caterpillar. So you can see only by adding the numbers, %. Trophic efficiency and ecological pyramids. Trophic efficiency is the percentage of production transferred from one trophic level to the next. It usually ranges from 5 to 20%. We say 10% as the norm. So here is an idealized pyramid of net production. So you have 1 million joules of sunlight. So this is energy. So this example assumes a trophic efficiency of 10% for each link in the food chain. Notice that the primary producers convert only about 1% of the energy available to them to net primary production. So primary producers, 10,000. Primary consumers 1,000, secondary consumers 100, and tertiary consumers 10. So it decreases by 10% level. So relative food energy available to the human population at different trophic levels. Dynamics of energy flow in the ecosystems have important implications for the human population. So here, eating meat is a relatively inefficient way of tapping photosynthetic production. Most humans have a diet between these two extremes, vegetarianism and carnivorism. Worldwide, agriculture could feed many more people if everyone ate only plant material, if everyone was a vegetarian. So the green world hypothesis, a green ecosystem. Most terrestrial ecosystems have large standing crops of vegetation despite the large number of resident herbivores. The green world hypothesis offers possible explanations for this option. Okay, so several factors that keep herbivores in check. Plant defenses, spines and noxious chemicals. Remember in the previous chapter we talked about acacia trees that have these awful spines. They have mutualism with the red ants. Limited availability of essential nutrients. Animals need protein that plants supply in small amounts. Abiotic factors. How hot or cold it is and the amount of moisture. Intraspecific competition, territorial behavior, and interspecific interactions, predators, parasites, and disease. This is probably the most important factor.